Welcome to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. Hi, this is Ken Blanchard. We need a new leadership model in business today, one that values both people and results, where leaders see their role as serving instead of being served. In this podcast, my friend and colleague, Chad Gordon, interviews experts who help us explore different aspects of leadership. I know you'll be encouraged and inspired by what you hear, and you'll walk away with ideas and insights that will help you be the type of leaders others want to follow. Ready to get started? I'll be back at the end of the interview where I'll share what I've learned and how I'll be putting it into action. Now enjoy this installment of the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast.
Linda Berens, welcome to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you, in spite of the cold.
Oh, yeah, it feels like that's a common theme for a lot of people. You're the author of Understanding Yourself and Others, an introduction to the four temperaments. And I think everybody, especially our listeners of this podcast, they're familiar with temperaments and the value, but why have you dug so much of your energy and your resources into understanding and helping people understanding temperaments to help them communicate better with others?
I think it was mostly because, it was fascinating. I found it useful. And because when I grew up, I was kind of an odd duck in a small town in Kansas as a woman with my air temperament.
How so? How did that play itself out?
Well, I just found it hard to fit in a bit as a teenager, when it's really important to fit in. Always got good grades, that kind of stuff, but I wasn't so interested in this. Social talk was hard. So
you talk about how people are unique. And so for those that may not have the familiarity with the four temperaments, give us just a quick round robin. Go through all the temperaments and give us some just a real quick descriptor of what that means.
Well, okay. So why don't I start with air? Each pattern has a core psychological need that must get met. And then there's some talents that go with that and some other behaviors. So for air, the core psychological need is to be competent and knowledgeable and to have mastery over whatever it is they figure out they should have mastery over. And they tend to want to get a strategy going. So their talent tends to be more around strategic thinking and long-term kinds of things. So that's air. Water is the core psychological need for water is to have a sense of unique identity, not only for themselves, but they want everyone else to have a sense of their unique identity and to have meaning and purpose in their lives. And they seem to be, people with that pattern seem to have been among the first to recognize that purpose is really important. And their talent, we call it diplomacy, but the talent really is about connecting with others and knowing what they need, and then finding ways to give them some feedback or some praise or some hope. So it's about develop, and they see potential. I guess that's really the best, is that those with a water pattern tend to see the potential in others and look for that potential. Then there's fire. And fire, the core need is for having an impact and having the freedom to do what they see needs to be done in the moment. And so wanting to have an impact to see a result, and a positive result. And most of us want to have results, but for someone with a fire pattern, it's really about some kind of impactful result, seeing some, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. It could be a meal, it could be, a big project, whatever. And their talent is tactics. They see the next actions that need to be taken in order to achieve a goal. And so there's a fair amount of drive to action, actually. Earth those with an earth pattern have a core psychological need, I think, for stability and a hunger for responsibility, and all of that usually involves some. We all need to belong, but for those with an earth pattern, belonging gives them a place to be responsible and to make sure the world will go on. And the talent for earth is logistics, and they just seem to have a knack for knowing how to how to get all the right things in the right place and the right people, not to the wrong people, so things go well and things don't go wrong. So that's the nutshell.
Love that. And so, I've heard it described as, if you can really focus in and hone in on understanding where you are, and then understanding kind of the framework of where other people are, it's kind of like discovering your superpower, who you are at your core, so you can better develop and grow. So how do you see it? How does this specifically, how does me understanding what I am, how are you understanding what you are? How does that help me thrive?
Well, for a lot of people like myself, we really weren't appreciated for what it is, who we are at our core. So it's about reclaiming that. Sometimes there are situations where growing up, we were not really appreciated. I mean, I was definitely appreciated. It just was that little bit of odd duck stuff as I grew up. But there are some for whom, the environment or the parents are saying, be this way, and that's the message they got. So they get a "don't be you" message.
So when you understand yourself at a deeper level. I get the sense, so you really understand how your core needs influence things like motivation, your career satisfaction, communication, problem solving. So you said, your words were, you felt like a kind of an odd duck. So for people to understand kind of their wiring a little bit more, it can lead to them being more comfortable in their own skin and showing up at work, I think, more authentically, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the thing is, if you know that you're doing something that isn't your talent, that doesn't need what you do the best, that doesn't mean you can't learn to do it. You can just sort of recognize that and not beat yourself up for how much energy it takes, for example. And I think that's a really key thing, is about starting to manage yourself, lead yourself, if you will.
We talk about another aspect of learning, kind of, the essential motivators, and you get to understand as well, kind of each of these have kind of unique stressors and shadows. So can you kind of talk about what that means by your own? I'll just use wiring. That's a very comfortable term for me, if that's okay. But you have unique stressors and shadows, and when you recognize those, you can understand how to manage those.
Yes, and that's a huge deal, because when those core needs aren't getting met, we can start to recognize that that's what's wrong. So what has helped me a lot for myself, for example, is to recognize that sometimes when I'm overloaded and feel stressed, I may not even recognize I'm stressed, and then I say, "Oh, this is what's going on. I'm having to learn too many new things, and I'm not competent in any of them." And that's actually kind of the exaggerated belief, because I may be fairly competent, but there's a constant quest for mastery and competence. And so if I'm not feeling that way, then I get stressed and actually wind up becoming even more more incompetent or less competent.
So we've been talking a lot about us and understanding ourselves. Let's talk about the effects and the positivity and the impact we can have on others. So how can understanding not only yours, but how can you understanding others, how can it help people understand others and value the different perspectives? How have you found understanding kind of your model can help you be a better communicator, a better leader, a better teammate?
Well, the main thing is managing yourself is a big piece, but looking at recognizing the differences and recognizing that those differences have value. So it sort of gets out of what my good friend Sue Cooper used to say, be like me syndrome. And it's very important that we not expect other people to be like ourselves. So once we know about these differences, we can appreciate those differences and see what contributions they make and people with those differences. So we stop expecting them to be different than they are and appreciate what they bring to the table. And that shows up in teamwork, it shows up in leadership, it shows up in parenting, it shows up everywhere. When you can know yourself well enough and then make space for other people to be different, and then eventually learn to communicate in a way that they will understand as opposed to the way that you understand.
It's a great opportunity really to shift your perspective, and really kind of think about things. Because I'm a big believer. I mean, I've been with Blanchard for coming up on 2 decades. And so I think the greatest gift we all have is awareness, right? Because until you're aware that there's actually a method to the madness, you're going to kind of do things you've always done, right? And so now that we're aware that people have different wirings and they're made a little bit different than me and you, it gives you a chance to shift your perspective, accept others for who they are and what they need. And so where have you found that as well? It's kind of a variation on the last question, but where have you found that is, helps most when you can actually see people in a different light and be more accepting of who they are?
Well, I think the first thing is we stop expecting them to do things our way and start to appreciate the way they do it. So, for example, air and fire is a good comparison because while strategy and tactics have a lot in common, there's a common. Usually, there's an outcome that people are after, so you can talk about what's the outcome and what is the goal. But if you want to take a strategic approach and somebody's moving to action much more quickly, then that's going to feel like the sky is falling, like something's going to go wrong. And then if you aren't aware of that difference, that it's really an appropriate thing for if you're not aware of that difference and don't realize that in the situation we're in, it's really more appropriate to be tactical and to take action. Or you can at least talk with that person if it's not appropriate and you're the leader, or even if you're a teammate, to say, I know you want to take action, and there may be an opportunity there right now if we don't take it. However, I'm wondering if we can consider a longer view and see if there's something that would keep us, is there something getting in the way of the action that we can get rid of first, so that action will be more effective. So what I was doing is trying to acknowledge the talent, and then see if we can make that even better by considering a different approach.
What's at risk if you don't make this change? What have you seen happens if people just keep banging their head up against the wall, expecting everything to be easy for them?
Well, the first thing that came into my head was the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
I think a lot of dissatisfaction, perhaps mistakes get made that don't need to be made. I think people don't bring their best self to the work in the work environment if they're not appreciated for who they are, or it takes a lot more energy. So then they're tired. And when you're tired, it's a lot harder. So I think job satisfaction isn't just about the job, it's about the match of the job to what the person brings. And doesn't mean that somebody can't do the job that isn't matching the pattern. What it means is it may take more energy, or they may need more practice to get up to the skill level. I don't have a talent for logistics.
Yeah.
But in the training room, I soon learned to pay a lot of attention to logistics, because if you don't have everything in place at the right time, the whole training will fall apart or you wind up stumbling. So I soon learned to do a few of those things, never as skillfully as my colleagues who have that pattern, but still, it just makes things a lot easier if you can acknowledge what needs to happen using that 4 skill set, strategy, tactics, logistics, and diplomacy as a framework for what's needed here. And then people can exercise their talents and feel better, or they can find somebody to mentor them in the skill that's needed.
Time for a couple more questions. You mentioned something that you talked about, like when people are tired, sometimes the best intentions go away. But for your model, for this model, this isn't just a work model. I always like to joke around, even the programs that Blanchard sells, like a lot of this stuff you can take home, but are you too stubborn to try some of these things at home because you have these familial relationships that you just kind of fall into? But understanding your partners, understanding where they are and how they like to be communicated with. Like this is a game changer, not just at work. This is a game changer in all your relationships in life.
Yeah. Or your kids or your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things about that. One is really how, if it's in a parenting or even a partnership, recognizing what the other person needs is really important. And helping them or making space for them to be themselves as opposed to be like you.
Yeah.
And if both people know that in the partnership, you can, for example, my husband and I have the same pattern. And so we know our pitfalls, and we kind of have to call on some other people sometimes to help us in all kinds of relationships. And even if the other person doesn't know the different styles or temperaments, you can start to make a hypothesis about what that is and make space for it to happen without judgment.
Yeah. So a lot of our listeners who may not be as familiar with this model probably have heard of MBTI, probably have heard about DISC. In your opinion, how does this model differ? How is this different than those models?
Okay. So this model's really, really old. Its histories go back over 25, probably by this time now 30 centuries. So the research that David Kersey did cited all of these great thinkers and looked at these patterns. And he was my professor, and that's where I learned this. The DISC model is not looking at innate patterns of psychological needs. The DISC model is looking at behaviors, and therefore patterns, and they do not line up with earth, fire, air, and water. They're all about different things. When I looked at that difference, we created a different model, which was very similar to DISC and social styles. We call it interaction styles, but it's a different set of 4 patterns, and they have different kind of information. So instead of core needs and values and talents, it's core drivers and the way we interact with others, and some particular skill sets that go with those. The Myers-Briggs, what I found when I was exposed to that, and is that if you look at the patterns in the Myers-Briggs, it isn't about adding up the different letters and then saying, oh, this is that temperament. Mm. So I found, I didn't find it. David Kersey found it. So just giving credit where credit is due. He looked at how they lined up and he found that S and J, so if you are accurately identified with that type code, and there's always measurement error with an instrument, by the way, I have to say that. So S and J, those people with those letters in their Myers-Briggs type code will fit the Earth pattern. And it makes sense logically, but you don't want to hear all of that technical stuff. So, and it with S and P, so SP, that pattern, those people, those four types with those four types with those preferences match those four types with those preferences match the fire pattern. Mm. And then, lo and behold, it isn't like taking the second letter and the last letter. For the air, it's N and T.
Okay.
And then for the water pattern, it's N and F. And it's really, once you understand both models, really, the Jungian basis of the Myers-Briggs and the temperament models, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But
when you look at it and you think, well, wait a minute, why isn't there a parallel construction? But it just is a match of patterns.
Fascinating. Well, Linda, we have time for just one more question. I always like to close out the podcast with this one. And it's we've got such a great dedicated group of listeners out there. And if you had one bit of wisdom that you'd like to impart upon them about what we've talked about today, what would that be?
Know yourself. Make space for others, and then shift your perspectives.
Love that. Linda Berens, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. If people wanted to learn a little bit more about you, about your research, where would you send them?
Well, I would send them to the internet, to our main website, which is interstrength.org. And it's inter, like INTER, mm-hmm. strength, as some people say, STRENGTH.org. And it's about internal strength and interpersonal strength, if that helps people remember it. So interstrength.org.
Wonderful. Linda Berens, thank you so much for your time today on Blanchard LeaderChat podcast.
Thank you so much, Chad.
And thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and like to learn more and also help us grow the audience, please subscribe to the LeaderChat podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, or wherever you're listening. And please share this with your friends. The best way you can help us grow, though, is feedback. As Ken Blanchard says, feedback is the breakfast of champions. So please write us a review if you haven't already. And by the way, this podcast is sponsored by the Ken Blanchard Companies. If you'd like to learn more, there's even a lot of free resources to better yourself and your organization. Go to kenblanchard.com. You'll find all kinds of free tools and materials to help you and others grow. Thanks again to our guests for joining us today. For now, I have the pleasure of turning it over to Ken Blanchard for his thoughts on what we discussed. Here it is, your final minute with Ken Blanchard.
Chad, I really enjoyed your interview with Linda Berens. The title of her book says a lot to me, Understanding Yourself and Others. I mean, what's more important than knowing who you are, what your needs are, what your talents are, and then finding out about the people around you. What do they need? What are their talents? How do you team together? And I love the way he uses the four temperaments, air, water, fire, and earth, to explain how you really build a team. And when Margie and I started our Blanchard company, we found out we were both water. And what did that really mean? It means that we wanted to find a sense of meaning and purpose, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of others. You know, how can we create an organization that really has meaning and makes a difference to others? And our talent to pull that together was connecting with other people and knowing what they need and all. And so it's a really exciting stuff. You know, we had to, as we built the company, bring around people with air and water and fire temperaments too, so we could really be the best. And so read this book and share it with your people and find out what are all the different temperaments on your team, and do you lack any? Do you are you over subscribed in some? And it's just a fascinating concept. And so thank you, Chad. Thank you, Linda. This is really, really good stuff.